Hello, everyone. Is the representative for District 6 present?
Present.
Yes.
Is the representative from the Hill CDC present?
Present.
Is the representative from the Hill District Federal Credit Union present?
Present.
Is the representative from the Hill District Consensus Group present?
Present.
Is a representative from the Wesley Center AME Zion Church present?
Present.
Is a representative from Shenley Heights Community Development Program present?
Present.
Is the representative from the Historic Hill Institute present?
Present.
Lakeisha let us know that she wasn't able to attend, but for the record, is the representative of Ujima Collective present? Is the representative from the state representative, Ariane Abney, present?
Present.
And Dan also sent me an email letting me know he's going to be a little late today, but for the record, is the representative of the Office Executive Fitzgerald present? Is the office of the representative of the Office of the Mayor present? Is the representative of the Pittsburgh Public School District present? Is the representative of Allegheny County Council present? Thank you so much.
Thank you. We do have a majority of voting members present with us, so we can move forward. I believe next we need to set our next meeting date. I believe we're targeting the week of June 19th. Looking at that Thursday would be the 22nd at 3 p.m. Can we have a motion to instruct the URA staff to set the next meeting?
So move.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll work with the URA to get the next meeting set up for June 22nd. I believe next on our agenda is the RFP subcommittee presentation, which I believe Arby is going to lead us in.
That's correct.
Okay, Arby, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, if URA staff could bring up the flow chart, and I sent an email with the words for this.
Sure, Arby, I shared those with the subcommittee via email. We didn't
I
have,
sent them to everybody on the committee email, but if you could give them up to.
we
if you
we
could
didn't
put
have
them up
time
on
to
the-
implement those changes, Arby. You sent them 10 minutes before the meeting.
I'm not asking you to make changes. I'm asking you to put them up on the screen when I report.
Right,
That's
we
what I'm
can't
asking.
because they're not incorporated into the PowerPoint. So we this is what we have. So I sent them and asked people to pull them up on their screens to follow along.
Okay. All right, so this is the application flow chart that the subcommittee came up with. And I'm just going to go through the high level steps. And please be aware that the high level steps have tasks that have a major task to be completed, and that task itself has several subtasks typically. So I'm going to read from what I sent to everyone. The background, the RFP flow chart was developed by voting members of the advisory board who are members of the advisory board RFP subcommittee. The RFP subcommittee voted on 29 May 23 to release the first draft of the flow chart to the URA staff. The advisory board subcommittee has determined that the Hill District community is best served by the resource navigator and quality control positions being filled by Hill District residents or staff from existing Hill District organizations and or RCOs. Those are people and organizations who know the people and the area they live in. The Hill District has several capable organizations and RCOs that have staff that can do this work and be supervised appropriately. Therefore, the first opportunities to fill the RFP positions and supporting personnel infrastructure should be given to Hill District individuals and organizations. Please note, the URE staff, after discussion with the two advisory board co-chairs, submitted a revised RFP on 31 May 23 that does not agree with the RFP flowchart. Flowchart notes. The flowchart above shows the high-level path of an application from submittal to the disbursement of the funds by the URA board. The following is a brief description of each symbol of the flowchart. Each symbol represents the high-level task. Note 1. Typically, the high-level task is a few subtasks that must be completed before the high-level task is considered complete. The written guidance instruction necessary to perform each task and subtask has not been developed. Here's a question. Does the advisory board desire to have a subcommittee of advisory board members? The members are to be determined to do this work or pay to have the instructions written by others. Please be aware that there will be further delay if the advisory board votes to pay for development of instruction. Note number 3, accountability and division of responsibility for the resource navigator and quality control positions has not been determined. Another question, per the accountabilities and the requirements of the resource navigator and quality control positions, and who do they work for? Following are the flowchart high-level tasks. Task number 1. The resource navigator position will review and process applications in accordance with written instructions. The following are examples of subtask instructions. Develop an application tracking method. Develop criteria determines what a completed application and a rejected application. What is a completed application and a rejected application? Develop standards to protect privacy, personal information, and proprietary information. Develop how applications will be tracked. Determine RM performance criteria. Develop application record retention policy. The subtasks of the quality control position are known. The subtasks necessary to complete the quality control task require written instructions that have not been developed. Task number 2. The resource navigator will forward the completed applications to the application review committee. Application review committee members or advisory board members who will be determined. There are subtasks necessary to complete this task and require written instructions that have not been developed. So that's the diamond, the ARC decision. The ARC makes a decision on whether or not the application is complete and meets all the criteria that has been previously established. Once that is determined, they will then forward the application to the advisory board, and the advisory board will make a choice or decision on whether or not they want the application to move forward to the URA board. If they do not want the application to go forward for whatever reason, if they consider it incomplete or doesn't meet criteria, then that goes back to the resource navigator. And the resource navigator is the person that talks to the applicant, the public, or whatever entity is, submitting or person is submitting the application. If there's things that need to be corrected or added and things of that nature, they'll communicate with whoever made the application submittal. And then it goes back through the loop. And once it goes back through the loop, it goes to the second time. Hopefully it gets approved by the advisory board for submittal to the URA board so that they can make a choice or decision on fund disbursement. And if they decide not to approve the application for fund disbursement, should be providing a reason for why not. And then that goes back to the advisory board and back to the resource navigator, who is tasked with communicating with anyone who made a application submittal. So that's the simple version. There are a lot of subtasks that need to be described and written down so that we have consistent performance. We get an application that's going to be processed the same way with meet the same criteria. And that's important because if people change positions or leave or no longer associated with this effort, You need written instructions to make sure that you can hold people accountable and that you're getting the product that we are paying for. So that's the big picture for what we see is needed. And again, the desire of the subcommittee is that the money is spent in the Hill if with people that live in the Hill and so forth, provided that they can do the work at acceptable level. That's the big picture. Thank you. Are there any questions? Hello?
I was waiting to allow others with questions, Arby. I did have a chance to review the work that you all did. It made sense to me. Both myself and Marimba did review it. We did not have substantial changes to it. There were, and not this document that you just sent over, but rather the actual RFP itself. There were minor changes just to make everything consistent. Did you want to also walk anyone through the actual RFP, or are you complete?
Well, the RFP that I read that you guys sent over yesterday evening, it seemed to me to not really agree with this. And there were several things that appear to me to be conflicted, and they weren't clear. And we need to spend the time to reduce the wording of this because there's too many words, in my opinion, which lead to interpretation. So I really want us to be clear. For one example is administrator, and we don't see the application review committee in this RFP. So the intention is the application review committee will be several people, from the board and any others that we deem necessary, the advisory board deems necessary, so that each application is reviewed objectively and transparently. And that's why it's important to have everything in writing. So, whatever choice or decision is made, you can see whether or not it's in accordance with written instruction. But those are the two. And then there is a cost factor. So I saw $75,000 in the document that you guys sent over yesterday evening, and don't know, what that would cover. Now, if we write the instructions, which we are capable of doing, now we're talking about paying people to perform the work and be supervised. All right. So there's an accountability there, and there has to be some infrastructure in how the people will be paid. There's, certain requirements for payroll and things of that nature. So the organizations that already have staff already have a system in place. So we wouldn't necessarily be paying for that. But what we would be paying for is them to make sure that the work is being done in accordance with written instruction. And so everybody's on the same page. So I don't see that in the RFP. There's several standards that need to be described. We don't have any standards for quality assurance and quality control. Quality control inspector and then resource navigator, they're going to be doing work. And one of the things that should be done is that the resource navigator and the quality inspector positions are interchangeable. So they should both have the same capability to do this work. And we haven't decided how many people it's going to be necessary, nor have we decided how many applications because we have a finite amount of money that we're going to spend. So there's several things that have to be considered and decided upon by the members of the advisory board. And I can go on and on. There's just a lot of gaps. The RFP doesn't reflect that. So let me go back to quality assurance. Quality assurance is a high level perspective. Are we doing the things we said we were going to do to implement this process? And then quality control is it being implemented correctly? So there's standards there that need to be delineated, put in writing and so forth. And we need to keep it very brief and simple so that everybody's on the same page. As I said, I think that the members of this board are smart enough to do this work, and we could probably have it done in 30 days to where we could be soliciting responses. But that's, everybody has to decide if they're going to be what I would say can do people or cannot do people. So and if we cannot do it, then we're going to have to pay for it. And when we pay for it, there's going to be some startup and familiarity costs and time associated with that. So there's quite a bit to unpack here, but that's the really simple version.
Okay, thank you. Do other members have questions or comments regarding both the application process flowchart and or the RFP?
So this is Dr. Ellis. I do think, I mean, there are clear conflicts here. So when it comes to the RFP, we need to decide how we're going to try to resolve these issues. And I still had concerns about the last issue that you brought up at the last meeting, Councilman Lavelle, about the legal ramifications of the URA board relative to this advisory committee.
Okay, I'm not sure what conflicts you're referring to.
If I may, in the previous version of the RFP, there was a clause in there that basically, and I'm being very general, indemnified the URA board, but there was no mention of indemnification for the advisory board. So what legal implications and so forth, they're not described. I can imagine some of the things that could be possible problems in terms of privacy and personal information and proprietary information and how that's handled. I can see that, but it's not clearly delineated as to what those things mean, what that clause means. So there was concern during the subcommittee meeting and how to describe that and what we should do about it. So essentially, there's a lot of work to be done, and we need to be meeting more frequently so we can get the work done and come to a consensus, if that helps.
Hannah, can you speak to whether or not it would be a challenge to add language relative to the indemnification of the advisory committee in the
Sure.
RFP?
Yeah, I can certainly add language to that effect, and I can include it alongside the URA indemnification language. I can tell you the reason why I didn't have it in there originally was because I believe the URA will be the only party to the contract with the consultant. But I can understand why the advisory board would want to see language to that effect, and I'm happy to put it in.
So
Thank you.
That
What are
was
the other
also in the
specific?
draft.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Alicia.
Oh, I'm sorry, in the edited draft that RB submitted before you guys put your edits on there, that section was there. I don't see it in the final one, in the one that was just sent by after your edits.
That is definitely not something that we struck from the document, so I don't know if that was inadvertently removed by the URA. Hannah or Julia, would you like to speak to that?
It
Because,
definitely wasn't taken out intentionally. Sorry.
okay,
Alicia.
because where it had the URA, we did say and advisory board. But if we could
Noted.
put that language in, that would be good.
Good catch.
Certainly, we can put that back in.
Are there other specific items that we can address so that we can move forward?
Yeah, so Councilman Lavelle, I was talking about what you brought up last week, which was that, and it's largely what Alicia struck out a lot of this language. She was alerted early on when she was probably one of the first persons from this committee anyway to look at the language. And it said that, you know, the URA, if there was any kind of conflict or if this committee couldn't decide on something, that the URA would have the final say. And that led to RB asking you some questions about what you were talking about. And you said, well, you know, yeah, I mean, basically the URA, this advisory board we are just an advisory board, and that legally the URA would have the final say. Everybody on the subcommittee was deeply concerned about that language. So that's not something that just needs to be clarified. That's something that Alicia started to strike line by line by line, and we all agreed.
Hannah and Julia, can you speak to that language? I know that we spoke about that at the co-chair level as well. It's my understanding that language has been stricken from the final version, whereby the URA will only make recommendations upon the recommendation of the advisory board, or will only vote upon the recommendation of the advisory board. Is that correct?
My understanding is a little bit different, Marimba. Sorry, this is Hannah. I believe the guidelines have language that allow denied applicants to appeal more or less to the URA for reconsideration. I think that's what we're getting at here.
Okay, then, so can you provide us with, and Councilman, provide us with language that addresses that specific issue on a procedural basis so that we can continue to move forward with the RFP?
So I can speak to intent. It is the intent of the URA board to not vote on anything that doesn't come from this advisory board. However, what I was simply clarifying, although that is the intent, because we are the actual board, we do legally, and it's in the guidelines, someone can appeal to the formal governing board for them to be heard. However, again, going back to when this was originally set up, it is our intent to not vote on anything that isn't first approved and recommended from this committee.
So, but how can we address that? I think that there's sufficient concern by members of the advisory committee to address that as a procedural matter. So what would we need to do to procedurally address the URA being able to override the advisory board's decisions? Thank you, Hannah.
Sure, and I'm thinking of an
everyone
answer to
could
your
turn-
question. Just a second.
If everyone
All
could
right.
turn their attention to the chat, that'd be great. But again, I think because we're talking about two distinct issues that intersect possibly in this process. So we're trying to get approval on the RFP to get that released so that we can move the process forward and get the application open for the community. So,
Well,
however, if we receive an application without addressing this procedural issue, then although technically the RFP is not an application right now, we're just trying to move forward with the RFP approval. So why don't we do this just for the sake of clarity? are there any other specific, and then we'll come back to this issue relative to either the guidelines and or the procedural matter at hand. Are there any remaining questions specifically on the RFP?
Yes.
And if so, what are those specific issues?
Well, right now, the RFP does not agree with the flow chart. And there's many things in the RFP that have not been discussed. And they need to be discussed by the full board after they've had time to read them. You just gave it to us yesterday. There's been 2 or 3 iterations of this, and no one has a clear understanding of what all these words mean. So we need time to read this and understand it and discuss it among ourselves before we have a vote. Because right now we're not ready for a vote. There's too many gaps. There's too many gaps, Marimba. There's too many open issues, open items. You know, you guys put in administrator. There's no, and took out application review committee. There's no resolution of that. Now that's a big thing that the subcommittee wants. The subcommittee wants the community to have control of how things are done, not by the URA.
Okay.
The community, wait a minute. The community wants control of how things are done. So a lot of things have been said to me, and one of them is, well, it seems like the URA and the Hill CDC are only interested in the Center Avenue corridor, and that the URA has on their website Center Avenue corridor, and the Hill CDC the same thing. But what about the rest of the Hill? That's a valid question, and that's a valid concern that many people have, and they want to see that that is being heard and being dealt with appropriately. We haven't discussed that.
Okay,
And
so
Let me,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marima.
No, I want to respond to, well, I appreciate, you know, people's concern. I obviously have to speak to, you know, the Hill CDC's focus being broadly on the Hill District. Anyone who follows our work knows that. But I think more importantly, I think, again, let's focus in on the RFP. And so the 2 issues that RB just brought up, and Alicia, I see your hand raised, are the language of resource navigator, administrator, and administrator being added. I'd like to speak to that specifically after reviewing the work of the committee, which we thought was, you know, good quality work. The subcommittee to review the RFP, it was clear that the scope of work was beyond a quote unquote navigator, right? So a navigator being someone who helps you kind of find your path through a system, an administrator being someone who also administers on behalf of or in partnership with. And so this role would absolutely be administering in partnership with the advisory committee. So we thought that it would be more explicit and perhaps get better results from the RFP with that small revision to the title. And then the other issue, RB, that you brought up was specific to what? Can you just clarify that other issue you have?
Well, the problem is that what you just described, let's stay with that piece. Okay, so there's no written guidance. So the administrator is left to their own whims, their own direction. And that's what the major problem is. So there's no written guidance to direct people on how to do this work. So now we're going to add another person that we're going to have to pay for when we should just write the written guidance that says, this is what you do. Follow this step by step, and this is how you get to the conclusion that we want. But that's a problem because we're going to spend money and time. Can I finish, please?
Sure.
We're going to spend money unnecessarily because whoever is this administrator has to come up to speed, and they have to figure out there's no standards, and there's going to be all this back and forth when we should just write the written guidance and provide that openly to everyone so they can see this is how this business is going to be conducted. That protects us, and it makes sure that we get a consistent product each and every time so that there's no favoritism. These are the guidelines, these are the requirements, this is the criteria, how you choose to characterize it. This is how it's going to be done and applied, and this is the decision. So that being said, the other piece about going back to the URA board because, oh, we want to appeal, they should be appealing to the people that said no.
Right.
That's what you were telling the Lower Hill developers with the DRP.
Mhm.
So now you want to change it, and it's
No, this is not my
very.
change, RB. Let's be
Wait a
factual.
minute, hey, listen, please. I'm not trying to debate you.
Right, but you
Okay,
are stating inaccuracies.
please let me finish. All right, I'm just telling you
Please be
that
accurate.
the same process needs to be applied. If we denied something for some reason, then they need to come back to us, not
Right.
go around us to someone else and say, oh, well, we don't agree.
Duly noted.
Right? This
Alicia,
is the community, Marimba. All right.
noted, RB. Alicia,
Oh, okay. Yes, I just wanted to just kind of say this a little differently, but at the same time, remind us that as an advisory board, every meeting almost, we have stated that we wanted to make sure that the community voices were heard, that there was community input. So while I hear the words control, I'm also focusing on community input because we all represent different or maybe even similar areas of our community, and we're here to voice their concerns as well and meet their needs. So when we looked at the edited RFP that was just sent down, one thing that was missing was the community input, which for us as a subcommittee, as already stated, was the review committee being formed. And that would be the committee that would really have role like an administrator would. And that would be the committee to make sure that the performance levels are up to par. Things are getting done, in a consistent, transparent, as well as in an equal and fair manner. So when that was taken out, I think there's confusion over what is an administrator, because their role as described really is similar to what the review committee would be doing. But at the same time, are we adding another job position for this? Because we were only dealing with the 2 jobs. And so just trying to make sure that the community input and that the community has this say from start to finish of this process, to also monitor even transmission of these applications to the next group.
okay, Alicia, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up as, the whole premise or preface for a lot of this, because I think that has not really been stated. I'm sorry, go ahead. What was that? I heard
No,
somebody.
there's actually a really simple answer to that. And that is that in the RFP that the committee reviewed, there were 2 review committees in the RFP. If everyone would like to turn their attention to the RFP, one of the review committees was the review of applications, right, for incoming applications. The other was the review of RFP respondents, and we thought that was confusing. So we changed the quote unquote review committee of applications to designated subcommittee of the advisory committee, because having an RFP go out that has two different review committees. One is a review, so when you're responding, if you all would put yourselves in the role of a respondent, right? So an RFP is issued, you're interested in responding, you're reading it, and you're seeing language about a review committee that's going to review applications, and then you're seeing language about a review committee that's going to review your submission to become the consultant. That was what the issue was with having the language of review committee used for both of those functions. So we just changed one of them, not the intent of having it as a subcommittee. Obviously, it's going to be this committee who designates the review committee, or it will be the whole committee that is the review committee. Whatever the case may be, that has not been defined in how we will do it. I think that just the intent of what will happen is very clear, that it will be either the entire advisory committee or a subcommittee of the advisory committee, but we couldn't have 2 different meanings for the same phrase. Does that make sense?
Well,
No.
we were looking at it as the same committee to ensure the consistent practices, the flow chart, because it would be very difficult for a respondent to the RFP to not know the process than they get with the review committee, application committee, that is not on the same page as the RFP stated. So
Okay.
ideally, your review committee would also be the person looking at the navigator applications, because they would also be the group to, if you will, assist, help, guide, lead, even look at the performance of the navigator. So that was really the thing. It really wasn't necessarily meant to be two committees, nor was it meant to be this particular subcommittee, as already stated, newly formed committee to involve URA members, this group members. I mean, it just may not be the same subcommittee, but a group that represents the entities and can get the answers needed, such as the financials, that type of thing. And
So,
iron out and streamline the process for a navigator or the respondent.
so I think that's an excellent point, but I do think that it stretches beyond the scope of the charge to the subcommittee. So if the
Right.
review committee for if the review committee for the RFP is
Mhm.
proposing that it is also the review committee for applications, that is something that the advisory board needs to have a full discussion about and make a
No,
decision on.
That's
And
not,
we,
that's
and
Right.
not,
can I finish, please? And that's something that we had not discussed at the advisory board level. So I think that we can discuss it. Obviously, it's something that we should engage in dialogue about so we can make a decision. But it was beyond the scope of the charge of the subcommittee to review and approve the RFP.
well, if I may, when you look at the flow chart, most of the things that you talked about would be done by the resource navigator, provided that they have the written instructions and guidance to do it. Once that's done, then the person that's in that position, in the quality control position, will have the necessary tools to process an application and forward it to the application review committee, who would be charged with reviewing the application and making sure that all the written guidance was complied with. That's two different things. They're not the same. We don't need two different groups of people to do that. Because we're going, if we do this right, making sure that we're all on the same page and we get all of the people reviewed, all the applications reviewed, in the same manner, regardless of who's in the different positions or on the board or so forth, then we are going to have a consistently good product. That has not been done. And the RFP is premature and doesn't reflect that written guidance. The written guidance needs to be attached to the RFP so that the people that are going to bid on the job, however you choose to characterize it, understand what they're bidding on. That RFP, as it's written right now, does not describe that. It does not describe it. It describes some positions. It doesn't describe the division of responsibility. It doesn't describe accountabilities. It doesn't describe timeline, things of that nature. The timeline that we're proposing is 30 days. We can have all this wrapped up and be voting on it by the end of the month and be putting the RFP on the street the first week of July. We don't need, the subcommittee objected to is that the 90-day timeline that the URA staff proposed. We don't need that. We
Right,
can do
okay,
this work.
so,
Can you,
yeah.
can I finish, please?
sure.
All right, we can do this work amongst ourselves and get it done and voted on by the end of the month, put the RFP out on the street in the first week of July. That's what we would like to do.
So why don't we all speak from
That's what
like
the
an
subcommittee would like to
individual
do.
on an individual basis, because we were prepared to move to a vote for the RFP. So in the interest of really getting this RFP out, I don't agree that there's not sufficient detail within the RFP. Others may have differing opinions. I encourage you to speak up if you've had an opportunity to review it. So people will have differing opinions, and that's okay. I think that there is more than sufficient information to respond as a consultant and that process can begin while standard operating procedures, which is essentially what you're referencing, RB, can be developed should we need to do that. That is also something that can be charged to a future consultant who can support the committee in that effort. There are a lot of ways to get to where we're trying to get. And I think that it's just a matter of whether or not the rest of the committee is comfortable actually voting. So I'd love to hear from the other committee members if they want to delay the release of the RFP, or if they would like to vote on the release of the RFP.
Can you
So
clarify one
this is
thing?
Reverend Grayson. I guess my question maybe is elementary. Can we do a hypothetical so that, let's say hypothetically, July 1, we were ready to release the RFP. Tell me, can someone just take me through if John Doe wanted to apply for so-and-so? If we could maybe talk through the steps, maybe we can, I think sometimes we're saying some of the same things, but maybe we should, to simplify it, can anyone just give me a walkthrough of the procedure that we go, oh, I got it, and maybe we're ready? Is that possible?
Sure. So essentially, the RFP would be released through the urban redevelopment authorities, and these steps are outlined in the final pages of the
Yes.
RFP. Would be submitted through the urban redevelopment authorities website, their procurement website, which could be advertised on all of our collective websites, right? If we wanted to send them out, we could all share it through our own networks.
Okay.
The respondents would reply to the RFP through that site. There would be a question and answer event that would happen sometime within 2 to 3 weeks within the RFP cycle, so that questions could be answered that may be ambiguous in the RFP. And then our expectation was that applications would be due 30 to 45 days. And I'm not looking at it, so I can't remember exactly which one was selected. Once that application period closes, then the designated subcommittee of the advisory panel, that's us, the advisory group, would review in partnership with the URA, and we could decide that the URA should not have a vote, right? If that's what we decided to do, that they should be a technical assistance provider, that they should give us input, but that they should technically not have a vote. The advisory board would decide who, if not the entire committee, is the designated review committee, make the decision, notify the consultant, and begin to onboard the consultant. But there could be steps after the selection process, such as developing standard operating procedures, right? There could be other things that happen during that timeline. Does that make sense for everyone to you? Do you understand what I said?
Yeah, yes, overall, yes. So that helps kind of a little bit. And then I think even from that point on, if we got through this stage, we can then, if there's some tweaking in the next round, but at least we have a sense of a process. Because in the talking, again, I can't get a sense from every opinion if we even have a clearer sense of the process, whether it's 30 days or 45 days as it go to the committee. You know, is it revolving? When's the next cycle? So just understanding that's, you know, if Jamal Doe applied on July 1, when would the questions, blah, blah, when could it end of the release of the first hypothetically check, and, you know, through that process. And so that kind of would help me understand the flow a little better, though there will be ongoing things that we could still tweak and work on as we build up what it should, our ultimate objective.
Absolutely. This is just the beginning of getting the process started to bring on the staff and the support that we need in order to get the application released.
Yes.
So how many people is this RFP for? How many positions?
2. It is
It
for
doesn't
a
show that.
resource navigator and administrator, and it is for a quality control person.
So I think we pretty much said that the administrator is unnecessary, and we need 2 people. We need a resource navigator and quality control. And those 2 people need to work together so that they're interchangeable, because there's not going to always be some quality control work to do. But we don't need we're going to pay somebody that's not going to do anything but talk. We don't need a consultant. Wait, can I finish, please?
Yeah, but you're misunderstanding when I say and administrator. That's not A and D. That is ampersand. So it's one person serving as the resource navigator and administrator.
Gotcha.
but that RFP doesn't say that.
Okay, let me clarify that. Let me
RFP
go
doesn't
to,
say that.
well,
An
we'll
RFP
clarify
doesn't,
that.
an
That's
RFP
no
doesn't
problem.
have in there a quality control person. So there's too many gaps, Marimba. I know you,
Hold on. Let me be sure I'm understanding. Hannah and Julia, did you all remove the quality control person?
No, we did not.
Okay, what page is the quality control description?
1 second.
So remember, you're saying we just should do resource / administrator, one person /
Yeah.
quality control. So really just add a slash, and I think we've answered that question.
Yeah. It's just 2 people.
Yes.
Ms.
Alicia?
George, your hand go up?
Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councilman. I'm sorry.
No, I keep dropping off, which is why I'm not talking, but I saw your hand go up. I was trying to call on you.
Oh, okay. I think where things are a little woozy right now, if you will, is the original RFP was presented to the subcommittee to make sure it was consistent with the flow, overall process, generically, obviously, at this point. And that RFP called for 3 different employees. The subcommittee thought 2 would do it and really was asking the advisory board to agree or not agree with creating this new group that would not only review the applications for the RFP, but also the applications for the grants and loans of the funding. That way, a level of consistency is there. So that's what the subcommittee was trying to accomplish and making sure that those things happen. So it's down to 2, the final draft number 1, because mind you, like Arby said, there were many drafts of this, only had the 2 folks in there. And it included, a lot of it was based on having a review committee. So that is where all this began. So we are down to the 2 job descriptions. The question is whether the advisory board would want to create a review committee to help the navigator or I'm sorry, whatever the new title is, do that and look at these applications consistently, fairly, and then go through the process of sending them on to the next level, if you will. So I just wanted to, kind of point that out, because if we do not have the review committee involved or a committee involved that can be consistent, how can we expect a navigator or anyone else to perform consistently? There must be some level of input there from start to finish. So I think
Right.
those 2 things is where we were kind of focused. Number 1, what the positions would be. Number 2, the review committee. And the review committee was not just the application committee, because remember, the subcommittee received 2 things. We started with the applications. Then at one of our meetings, we presented with the RFP and asked to edit that. And that's what was sent back. And then the latest was sent yesterday, I believe. So I think from the URA team. But we do, I think that those are the bottom line perspectives or angles that we were looking at and trying to get from the advisory board as a whole. Because the review committee would be responsible for finding out what the process can be, the timeline. The general process, I guess, is described in the flow chart, but there's more to it. And you have to have the people involved with that streamlining and making their suggestions and working directly with people to make sure that happens.
So I think just for clarity, we agree with all the things. I agree, and it's my understanding that Councilman Lavelle does, but he can speak directly. I agree with what you just articulated. The only thing that I do not agree with is calling it a review committee, because as a consultant who is responding to an RFP, they are thinking of a review committee as the people who are going to review their application, their submission of a proposal, right? The other review committee, and if you're saying that they should all be the same people, I think that's premature, because we've not given that daylight to the advisory committee. So if you're saying you think that in this moment, we should make the decision on designating a review committee for the proposals, making that the same review committee for incoming applications, then I think that needs to be explicitly discussed.
Well, that's my point, that's something that has to go before the advisory board as a whole, not just the subcommittee presenting it.
Right.
Because it has
So are
to
you
be
saying that
approved.
are you saying you're not comfortable, Alicia, at this time advancing the RFP unless we make those decisions about having the same review committee for the proposals as well as the applications? Because then that would, okay, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say personally, the latest version of edits, I had questions about, and as I stated earlier, I wasn't sure that it really lent itself to the overall community input and voice. Many things, for instance, said sole discretion, and we put and advisory board. I heard the legal part, also, not only the legal part, but even, some of the simple things like the background. If the URA's background is there, why wouldn't the advisory board's background be there for the sake of full transparency? Because this is not a sole decision. This is a collaborative decision between two entities.
We agree with that too.
So, I mean,
Hannah and Julia,
so I
you all
need to
agree
go
to that?
back, honestly, because the revised or edited version that we just received, changed some of the language. And to be honest with you, I'm not particular what you call the review committee, but I just believe that there should be a level there, a group that consists of the URA team, the advisory board, and just like we do with the subcommittee meetings. Those voices are still there with the input, but the latest version, edited version, does not reflect in whole the edited version that was presented by the subcommittee, from what I could see. So personally, I would need to go back and look at that. I would like to go back and look at this new edited version, because what I saw are really the points I'm bringing up now, which really are, at whose sole discretion, what sole discretion, as well as input. And RB had mentioned control, but I say input as well.
Sure. Okay, so Hannah and Julia, will you all please remove anything that says sole discretion of the URA and add the discretion of the URA and the advisory board? Make sure that is consistent throughout the entire document, please.
It is already in the revised edition, an edited version that was sent to them.
Okay, can you all please make
It's
sure?
already there in what the subcommittee presented. It's already there.
Okay, can you all please make sure all of those edits are captured? Do you have any concerns with that, Hannah and Julia?
No, I will make sure it's changed based on the version that we received from Alicia and RV and the subcommittee.
Okay, and are you able to, after the designated committee that will review applications, are you able to, can you unmute Hannah?
Sorry.
Okay, are you, this is also a question for both Hannah and Julia. Will you all also go into the document and make sure that the review committee, both for the proposals as well as the designated, application review committee, so to speak, both clearly states in all places throughout the document that we are referencing both the advisory panel and or its designees and the Urban Redevelopment Authority. And if someone has more specific language that they would like to say, please just drop that in the chat. Or if that's reflected in the changes, Alicia, we're happy to incorporate that verbatim. What we weren't comfortable doing was trying to define the review committee for applications without having daylight with the entire advisory board.
Right, and I agree with that. I think the subcommittee agrees with that, and that's what, was really designed to be presented today, and Arby was talking about. So I think we're on the same page with that.
Okay.
Well, one of the things that the current RFP doesn't delineate clearly is the division of responsibility and the reporting line and who reports to who. So, the URA is going to put it on their website, but the URA is not going to be responsible for accountability. So that application review committee was put in there also to identify the division of responsibility and who do these two individuals work for? Who do they report to? So a lot of the things that they're going to do, the reporting, should be going back to the application review committee, which is a subcommittee of the advisory board. That needs to be made clear in this RFP.
Okay. So I think that we don't have the answer to the reporting yet because we've not had that conversation at the board level. At this level yet, we've not talked about whether or not there's going to be a management committee, whether or not there will be, we've not discussed the reporting relationship yet. We just know that it will be members of the advisory committee, perhaps, maybe some involvement from URA staff to just make sure that we're following some of the technical procedures. Again, I don't necessarily think we need to refrain from issuing the RFP until we understand all of the reporting lines. We know that it'll be a designated body or a designated individual or a small group that is selected by the advisory committee and will be in place prior to the finalization of a contract.
So how can you issue an RFP without clear lines of reporting responsibility?
It's done all the time for consultants.
If I was applying for a position, I would like to know who I'm reporting to and what their expectations are. This RFP, does, as it's written right now, does not do that.
Right, understood. But I think that it's not necessarily something that absolutely must happen. It is something that is a nice to have, and we as a committee are not there yet. But we can still move forward with the process if it is the will of the committee.
That's not nice to have. That's a requirement, remember? That's a requirement.
And it will be in place by the time they are hired.
Well, no. How can you apply for a job and you don't know who you work for and what the expectations are?
They work for the advisory committee, RB.
It's not in there. It's not, doesn't say that. And why are we rushing to do this so quickly and make mistakes? Because
well,
everybody.
I think we have a differing perspective on a mistake. Well, I think that you're pushing for more structure, which is great. And I think that there's a place for that, but I don't necessarily know that it needs to happen prior to the issue of the structure
is up front. You put
other members should speak to the timeline because we've been saying month after month after month that we want to get the applications out.
There's no way we can use it. There's no way we can use the word that we're rushing this.
But your timeline, hold on. The timeline that I propose is that we would be ready to release the RFP by July 1st, the week of July 1st.
So that's in 30 days. So
that's in 30 days.
And the application is already there. And the RFP goes out, and as soon as people get hired, they get trained up and they start processing applications. You don't have that timeline. Your timeline is into August.
With all due respect, we've issued a number of timelines and said that things would be done by certain dates, and that has not happened.
Well, you've canceled meetings.
I've not canceled any meetings.
Yes, you canceled the March meeting.
I've not canceled any meetings,
in 2022.
In fact, I had probably the best attendance.
There's a whole lot of opportunities to have this work done that weren't taken advantage of. And now we're going to rush, make mistakes, and then be accountable for those mistakes. I do not support that.
I think you believe it's a mistake. I don't know that other members of the committee believe it's a mistake, and they should have an opportunity to speak on their own behalf.
Well, I will go on the record. I think if we rush through this, we're going to make mistakes, and I don't support that. We need to have the structure up front and then release the document, not
If other members
Whoa,
can speak to their
thing,
will,
if I
we can
speak,
make a
that's how you get in
decision.
trouble, make mistakes. I'm done. I'm done.
Thank you. If others could speak to their desire, at this stage, we can make a decision as to whether or not to, once again, delay the release of an RFP. Mind you, we're not even talking about the application. We're just talking about the RFP. It would be helpful if we could make a decision and move forward accordingly. So Richard Witherspoon, if you could speak to where you are, please, that'll be helpful.
Okay, I understand and I completely understand where we are trying to design policy. And designing policy is a tedious task. And when you're going through it and making that design, you don't get it right on the first go. You have to start somewhere. You have to have a cornerstone, so to speak, of that policy, and then have the ability and the flexibility to adjust as experience dictates. We're not going to get it right coming out the gate. There's no way, because we haven't had experience in this endeavor. But as long as we have the flexibility to repair any mistakes that we make, we really need to go forward. You know, if we keep going back and forth with the design, we're going to end up with something that won't be flexible enough for us to change. So the draft that we have, or the way to go forward, what we have now, I think that we should pull the trigger, so to speak, and go forward. And if we see a flaw, that we should come together in short order to correct that flaw. But as it is now, if we continue to go back and forth, we're just spinning our wheels, you know. So let's do something, because the people need it, and we have a responsibility and a commitment to fulfill. That's all I have.
This is Reverend Grace. Yeah, this is Reverend Grace, and I concur. But in pulling the trigger, I concur with Reverend Richard.
Thank you, Alicia.
Yes, I agree. I just would like to say this. I think that within a few days, if we met with Julia and the URA team and got these edits back into the version for the entire advisory committee to read and weigh in on, we should be able to move forward with this within a week or two. It's not that complex. I do know that processes and procedures have to be worked out, but I don't see where the edits should take any longer. I mean, I've been dealing with the technical part of this, just so you guys know. I don't see where that should take over a week or a week and a half. If we're trying to establish the policies, procedures, processes, that's where I believe this board, needs to, this advisory group needs to consider creating a new committee to define that and streamline that, because you're kind of, doing it trial by error. You don't know how many you're going to get. You don't know what type of respondent you're going to get. We may have to adjust all together. And I think that to give this group a chance, we need a group to really look at that and look at it consistently and be able to adjust, because what we write in the beginning, I don't think we can honestly say will be set in stone. It's just a jump off point. So in terms of the RFP, I do believe we should move forward. I think that some of the technical things and some of the things that were left out of this final edit that everyone seems like, we're saying we want back in there, can be added. And, it has been agreed upon to be added in this meeting. So I think that that'll only take like 2-3 days. Of course, depending on schedule. I realize it's the weekend. Sorry, forgot about that. So I say we move forward, but just get the RFP ready to go.
Kimberly, thank you, Alicia.
Mm-hmm.
Kimberly, are you there?
Yeah, so I have mixed feelings about this, but I think if the language that Alicia and the subcommittee decided upon can be struck, that's a good thing. the RFP, so there is a difference between the general RFP. I mean, I would say, RB, I do think that the general RFP describing generally what the resource navigator / administrator would do and the quality control person would do. I think that there's language that could be sent out there and attached to that doesn't have to be super specific. I mean, I wouldn't even want them to have all the details, right? Right up front. I would want those details to come, upon an interview or something like that, or even upon a hire. So I feel comfortable with the RFPs going out. I think maybe I feel like there are a lot of qualifiers though. There's like a lot of, hey, can you make this change, and can you make this change, and let's do this. And so that does make me a little nervous. Maybe we can see it, and just like in a week as opposed to like today. I feel like that would make me a little bit more comfortable, because then it's only, or I don't, if it's a couple days, that's fine. But I feel like we should see a final version.
Mhm.
So yeah, those are my thoughts on it.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you all for your input. Councilman, did you want to add anything? He may have had to step away. With
Sorry.
that, go ahead, Councilman.
No, I was just trying to come off mute, sorry. So my recommendation would be to formally vote this with final approval via email, seeing the final version. Based upon all of what I've heard, I believe the edits are the identification of the advisory board getting added to the RFP, add the background of the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund, and remove background of URA, clarify that the review committee is a group designed by the by the advisory board, and remove any reference to the sole discretion of the URA. Is that correct?
Yes, and with
Okay.
everybody else's suggestion, we need to have some language in there on how we're going to change this moving forward. So right now, there's nothing that governs that.
Understood. So with those changes being made, if there's any final change, I would ask that please people submit that by tomorrow. And with understanding that those changes are going to be made, I want to call a vote pending the final review by this committee via email.
So
By when, Councilman?
Excuse me, Marimba?
By when? I mean, I feel like a week is generous and sufficient, and anyone who has specific questions can float those with the body. And I do ask that all committee members do communicate with the full body for transparency purposes to make sure we're all on the same page, that we close this out by next Thursday. We vote today, pending the changes that you just outlined, Councilman. And if there's anything that floats to the surface, we will just adopt and formally accept that this vote stands by next Thursday with the revisions.
So are we going to add language that governs how we're going to change this as we need to going forward?
You mean the RFP?
Yeah, I mean, so from what I understand from the other members is they want to move forward, but they have reservations and they want to be able to change this moving forward. There's no mechanism, there's no language in the current RFP that allows that.
No, the goal is to close it out by next Thursday at the very latest. Everything would be, we will vote today pending changes, formal changes made by the URA relative to indemnification, background of the advisory board, removal of sole decision maker language, and then adding the specificity necessary for the review committee portion that will be sent back out. And this vote will stand assuming that there are no issues with that narrow scope of language.
I think Arby's question is that not with this vote, But going forward, if there are changes that are needed going forward, or is that addressed? I think that when we did the first, when we did the
See you
first
tomorrow.
terms and conditions, or
You said you were adding Fridays to your day, so.
Jamal, you're
Jamal,
on.
Jamal,
Jamal,
you
you
need
gotta
to
mute
unmute.
yourself. Okay, thank you. So, and when we had our, parameters for participating in this group, there were, different conditions we had to adhere to. And I think on that general document, that, the ability the ability to make changes to certain things should be included there, sort of like bylaws, where the group has the authority to make changes in documentations and things like that, a blanket clause in there.
So you're saying, Richard, that we need to add some language to the current RFP draft, correct?
Well, not the RFP. I'm speaking about all things, because when we first started way back, we had a document that outlined what we're responsible for and how we're to conduct ourselves, how the group is to be conducted and all that. And it's sort of like bylaws, so if there's language in there that says we have the authority to make changes to policy, for example, this group is allowed to do that. That would be for everything going forward.
Right, that's inherent in the role of the advisory committee. Any member at any point can move to introduce, make a motion to engage in dialogue on any given topic. There's nothing that prevents a member, an individual member, from requesting a point of discussion or making a motion. So we don't need to have specific policy around the RFP. In fact, that would probably not be the precedent we want to establish for the way that we operate. But I think that the intent and the point is accepted. And I think it's really just a matter of making sure that we, honor the request and make sure that we're hearing all of the members and strive towards consensus when possible. And certainly, voting on any critical decisions.
That's right. So that's like a blanket policy almost.
Right.
Right. And so given that I know along with some other URA staff, are going to have to step away from this meeting in a couple minutes, I would like to finish out regarding the vote to approve the RFP. So I'm gonna just go in order. So Maruma Lyons.
Councilman, I know this probably is falling out of typical rules. Can you make sure that you restate the with the stated amendments previously stated by you, or if you can restate them just so everybody is clear that we've heard the concerns and that they will be addressed in the final document that's received.
Yes. Hold on. Add indemnification of advisory board into the RFP. Add background of the Greater Hill District Neighborhood Reinvestment Fund and the removal of the background of the URA. Clarify that the review committee is a group designated by the advisory board and remove any references to the sole discretion of the URA. Those changes will all be made and be sent out to this group for final review.
Well,
With that,
you left out the application review committee.
because that is outside of the scope of the RFP.
So,
But it will
So
be
you're telling me-
designated, it will be designated by the advisory committee. That's the
well,
language that's
no,
being.
no, I'm saying that the people that this RFP, which is actually a contract, a form of a contract, who do they report to? That's not clear.
Councilman, I'm in
report to-
favor of moving forward.
They will report to
You're
the
in favor
advisory
of
board.
moving forward, you're gonna get us in trouble.
That's my vote. We all have a right to vote.
Based-
I am in favor of moving forward as stated by Councilman with the
Based
revision.
on the
Why is the
conversation
co-chair
I
voting?
heard, I'm not voting. The other co-chair
No,
is voting.
she's a co-chair, she should not be voting, that's Robert's Rules of Order.
It was established and the rules say that she's a voting member. So I'm gonna begin with
Okay,
Member
all right,
Lyons.
so we're just gonna do anything we
Yay.
want. I
Yay,
just don't want us to
Councilman.
get in trouble. That's the only thing I'm concerned
Sure.
about.
Yay, Councilman.
Richard Witherspoon,
Yay.
R.B. Bankston,
Nay,
Reverend Glenn Grayson,
Yes.
Alicia George,
Yes.
Dr. Kimberly Ellis,
Yes.
and Lakeisha Wolf is not with us today. So it does pass. URA, if you will please make those changes and send the information back out, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Yes, we will do that, Councilman.
Thank you. Is there any new business from members?
Well, not new business, Councilman Lavelle, but I just want to remind everybody that upon these changes being made and sent out, everybody let's just take a deep dive into making sure that anything that we see, we draw attention to it. Because I think that I'm satisfied, but I'm not 100% sure. So I just want everybody to, I mean, I was thinking about all the corrections you made, Alicia, all the comments that we made in the subcommittee meetings. And I'm not sure, to be honest, that everything is addressed with the removal of the sole discretion of the URA, but it's good to start there. So
Kim, I'm like you. I'm not sure. I'm about 80% sure if that much. But as we stated, we got to start somewhere. We won't be 100% until it's test driven, until we start using it. Then when we tweak it, then we'll get to that 100%. But starting out, we're not going to be absolutely sure of this process.
yeah, I mean, and I'm just encouraging us to take the week that we've been given, you know what I mean, and look over the language one more time, just so that we can be more sure than not.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else for the good of the order? If
yeah,
not,
I would like,
ahead.
I would like to make a motion to have at the next meeting an accountability of the money that's in the fund, what's been spent and so forth. We've never had that. All we got was a balance in January of 2023. So from the beginning in October 2021 to today, how much money is in the fund, what's been spent, itemized. I would like a motion to have that for the next meeting.
So move. Or if someone else wants to move that forward. We can
So
have a
moved.
financial report.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We will provide that. I don't believe anything's changed, but we will certainly provide that.
And to be more
Detail.
consistent, you may even want to consider doing it maybe on a quarterly basis.
Absolutely, if not monthly.
Anything else? All right,
Wait.
thank you all.
Wait, Councilman Lavelle, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Are you asking for the end of the meeting or like literally anything else? Because I do have one quick thing.
I'm in for the good of the meeting, but go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no. So I just wanted to remind everybody that the whole home repair program just opened. And I think that we should be encouraging everybody that we know to apply for the whole home repair program. There are people in our community that have emergency repairs. And so while we're, moving along, trying to perfect the process, and rightfully so, please do tell everybody about the whole home repair program. It opened, I think, yesterday, and the deadline is June 30th. And it's also for all houses in all of Allegheny County. And they already admitted that everybody will not be served. So, if you know people and they have like pressing details, one, this is what the resource navigator was going to have to do anyway. But go ahead and point them to this particular program, and maybe they can get started, and they could have the repairs underway before our next meeting.
Kim, send that to me. I have 2 people pending right now with that situation.
Okay, I'll send you the link.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you all. I'm gonna call this meeting
Thank
to
you.
adjourn.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right.
good day, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
Have a good one.